Okay, so anybody that has listened to the second Hakdama, then you've at least received some version of glasses that we're going to try to wear when we're going through the Megillah itself. So those glasses, high level, are the positive and negative midot that the person has, and how that's going to be expressed throughout the characters, throughout the interactions between the different characters. How do these characters interact with each other, and what does that mean when it comes down to each one being a different midah? So that's what we're looking for here. We're not gonna read the psukim one by one, but what I want to try to do is that you and I will have a conversation about the big picture of each one. I know you know it well enough, just like me, although we're not experts at it, but we'll be able to have a conversation about these type of midot and how they're being expressed. And so if I could start off with just like a big picture view of these midot, and then we'll dive into the specific sections here. High level, there's many ways to like set the high level frame of it. When we started last time, we started with it being about family. But within the family framework, there's many different elements to the family. So father, mother, children is the simplistic form. And we're going to see throughout the story of father, mother, and children, which I didn't chop how big the children was until a few days ago, within it. And the problem that it's going to be laying forth in the very beginning is the difference between the internal world and the external world, the same way we started off the Akdama. Our internal world, when we're talking about Achashverosh in the beginning, right, which Achashverosh is expressing for us how we act, our internal world had one agenda and our external world had a different agenda. Okay, so if chesed, when we're talking about it as a midah, if chesed is when I'm doing for others, it comes from a place of ahava, comes from a place of love, the external expression sometimes might not fit the internal expression. And here, what happens to Achashverosh, and it seems like it happens to the entire kingdom, unfortunately, is that they were doing chesed from a place of kavod, not from a place of ahava. So all of a sudden, we took one midah of the internal world of a person and another midah of the external expression, and they're connected with each other, and that creates the internal chaos for the person. That's when things start to go wrong.
It's a very deep way of looking at corrupted midos, right? Whereas they're not corrupt, totally disconnected from the good.
Yeah,
They're using the good, but then corrupting it at a certain way in the path to its expression.
When evil is expressed in honesty, so when you're an ish emet and you're willing to be true about yourself, and therefore you're willing to express evil and good in your truest form, so then you can work on your internal world. But when there's a deception between your external and your internal world, then you don't know what's going on. What's going to happen, probably, most people will experience this, is like you will be expressing emotions that don't make sense to you. Why am I feeling this way? What do you mean, why are you feeling this way? So if you have an internal organization, so then you identify what are the thoughts that are coming to your mind. Where is that coming from in your internal world? Okay, this is the problem that I'm going through right now. And we go through it. Everyone's normal. We all have problems. This is normal. But the question is, how do you deal with it? So, but going back to the story itself. So, Achashverosh, if we're looking at the first few psukim, and it seems like this is the way Mordechai and Esther wants us to think about Achashverosh, where it's really like building him up, right? Even just to start with, like Vayihi bimei Achashverosh, like at his times, why not bimei Mordechai? Like, why is the focus of time focused on Achashverosh as opposed to the focus of time focused on the Jewish people? So the story seems to be about Achashverosh, and we're going to see how it's a transformation in Achashverosh's life, and that might make sense. Okay, in his time, his internal motivation, I'm jumping so that we don't spend too much time, but his internal motivation seems to be Behar'oto et osher kvod malchuto. He was, meaning it says what he was trying to do. So it explains to us what was his motivations. He was trying to show off his wealth, his kavod, his malchut, his yakar, his tiferet, his gdula, meaning show off everything that's good about him, right? Now, we could break these down into them, but I really want to use Haman's expression as the breakdown of Gaiva, if it's okay. But to just explain on the flip side of it where chesed comes from. Because his chesed was unbelievable, right? He comes and he does a party for 180 days for other people in his home. He didn't do it in the shul. He opened up his home to people. And he gave everybody what they wanted to the best of his abilities, right? Everyone should get whatever drink they want and new cups every single time, etc., etc. So on the one hand, he has an external expression of chesed. Biggest party ever existed in the world. On the flip side of things, his internal expression was that of gaiva, not of ava. Okay, so that's the frame. That's like the first frame, if you want to think about it like that.
Right. He did it also in the opposite way, not just in the expression, but he took the Chazal say that he took, I don't know if you want to leave the Chazal out of it, but I want to do it the way you set it up, that we look at Chazal as like a proof that Chazal say that he was using the Klei HaMikdash and the Big Day Kuna. And what does it say? This just popped in because of your diuk there. It's Osher Kvod Malchuso. It now becomes his. It's in his orbit. It's all about him.
Ah, beautiful.
And so things that were clearly not his became Osher Kvod Malchuso and became the Baharoso. Like it's all about him now. So it's not just in what he expresses, the chesed he expresses to other people, but now the things that come into his orbit become part of him as well.
You're just pointing out something that's so cool. We're going to get to how Haman or Memuchan's advice comes in. And
that got me thinking as well.
Yeah, I wasn't looking at how much maybe Haman was looking up to Achashverosh and was saying, Achashverosh, these are the strategies that you're doing. Meaning, this is what you're doing. I'm going to support that and give you strategies to make it better. I didn't realize that. I always thought that Haman Kilu had it in him the entire time.
Right, and I like that from you. You've told me that before, and I'm just using that logic that like he created an orbit around him. He created this, what do we call it today? An echo chamber, right? A place where kavod was the currency.
Yes,
that's what we spoke about. That's what you talked to me about. That's what you gave me eitzah on. That's what I tell you. Everything is in the orbit, is in the echo chamber of kavod.
Beautiful. Meaning, assuming that the king is an expression of the people, which is what it is. I mean, that's what we say, right? So that the king is meant to be an expression of the people, not the opposite.
Okay.
So I don't know what to say here, what was first and what was second. Meaning, did Achashverosh grow up in a world of kavod and then he made it worse? And then Haman made it way worse, right? Everyone has to bow down to me, like gets to the top. Or was Achashverosh the source of the problem?
Well, we discussed that also in the eyes of Chazal. Like, what was Achashverosh?
Right.
He didn't necessarily grow up in a world of kavod, which maybe psychologists would tell you that's the reason why he was so kavod hungry, because he didn't grow up with it.
Exactly.
But then where does Vashti? Vashti did grow up with it. So did she? So there's the backstory of why he needed kavod is unknown to me, and I don't have the capabilities to really understand why. But Chazal were pointing something out by giving us his backstory. It's not that he's unknown and he shows up, Vayhibi Me'achashverosh, this fake, like they told us who he was. He was the stable boy. They told us where he came from. Chazal was telling us a story here that we can use to understand where the midah of kavod comes from. So,
well, but both of them are true, meaning the beauty is the fact that kavod can come both from Achashverosh and from Vashti. Kavod is not dependent on whether you have or received kavod in the past. Kavod is dependent on Yitzulei V'Adam Raminu Rav. If the people around you, when you were a child, were chasing kavod, then that would be something built into you, and therefore
whether they had it or not, they had external factors.
It has nothing to do with external. Kavod, all of these are internal. Mamish.
Right. That's it's reminiscent of the idea that we say that by machzis shekel, that Vadal doesn't give, the poor person doesn't give less and the rich person doesn't give more, because both of them have to meet at the bottom. The poor person can say there can be gaiva to the consumption with self for the poor person, and there be consumption with self with the rich person. And so they both have to curb that consumption with self by giving only a machzis shekel. You have to give a machzis shekel and you have to only give a machzis shekel. But we come together to say that we have the same tafkid, we have the same goal to curb that consumption with self. And that maybe is expressed through this Vashti Achashverosh backstory.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Okay, so just one thing that I do want to say here, which is I think quite valuable. So yain, what is wine? What is wine? According to Chabadpedia, again, I'm going to use as much as I can when we're talking about Kabbalistic ideas. I want to try to keep it sourced so that when I explain things afterwards, at least it's sourced. So there's two types of bittul. So when we're talking about kavod, right, the midah of gaiva, the midah of ego, the midah of thinking about oneself, the process or the tool that you use to extract yourself from that state of being is called bittul. Bittul is split into two. There's bittul beitlavut, right, where you're passionate and filled with simcha of the bittul.
Devotion almost.
Yeah, but even the bittul is a positive experience.
Right, devotion. Devotion is a positive experience, right?
I love it.
In
Okay.
that sense. Yeah.
I thought you were taking out of the positive when you were saying devotion, but you're saying still.
No, yeah, that's
Beautiful. So that's yain, according to Chabadpedia. Chabadpedia says that the concept of wine is simcha of the avoda b'hitlavut. Okay? And so I don't know if I'm saying that, how to say it in English exactly, but okay. And then the other, we're going to get to the other type of bittul when we get to that in the story. That's not breaking. Okay, so that's just the wine. That's very important because wine is filled in the entire story. Bread is not a big thing. Right? The Chafetz Chaim in his Akdama to the Mishnah Berurah says that there's two foods for the soul, for the neshama of the person. One is bread and one is wine. Bread is halacha, wine is sod. Here, the Megillah, it's all about sod. It's all about wine. Okay? We're not even the mishtah afterwards with Esther. It doesn't talk. It's a mishtah, right? So,
what did she serve there? Yeah,
it doesn't actually say what she served, but a mishtah
right.
they left drunk.
Mishtah, but it does say mishtah yayin.
Yeah.
So it was clearly wine, right?
But it doesn't say that they didn't serve bread. I wouldn't.
No. But again, we have to read the Megillah. Right. There is an element of reading it at face value, and what it's trying to ramiz to us is that it's a mishtah yayin, not a mishtah lachem.
Yeah. Okay, beautiful. So that's wine. And just one other word that I do want to just bring out here, which is so important, is that what the king does, he commands his entire house to do kirtzon ish v'ish, to do as the desire of each person. The ratzon of each person, which we know is keter. So the king is expressing that. The problem was that his whole purpose was kavod. But if it wasn't from that, that's the ideal. We want to get to the place where when someone comes into our house, we're thinking about what is their desire.
Ish v'ish, right.
So meaning it ends that section, right? There's the break. It ends that section with like sort of the ultimate level of chesed that you can get to just for the wrong reasons. Okay. And then comes in Vashti. And so Vashti, the way I am experiencing Vashti here, especially when we're comparing it to Breshit, is Vashti is the first wife, the first expression of wife, if you want to think about it like that. And if we're saying that Achashverosh is going to be the central character of the story, and he's going to be going through transformations that we're going to learn from, the transformation of him being married to Vashti and him being married to Esther is a huge transformation. It's very critical to the story. So understanding how Vashti acted and understanding how Esther acted is critical, because if we're talking about how we are as a person, if we assume, just like we assume with Esav and Amalek, that they're someone else, then we're never going to learn from them. But if we're assuming that Vashti is here, then all of a sudden there's something else going on. How do I work on myself? Well, Vashti mirrored the way we know from Chazal, right? Husbands and wife mirror each other. So Vashti mirrored Achashverosh. She also threw a party. She threw a big party. And what happened? What was the problem that happened? That if our agenda in the home is kavod, if that's the focus, then the second one person hurts the kavod of the other person, then there's an explosion. And so Vashti says no to the king, right? You ask your wife to do something, and she says no. You hurt my kavod. First expression of hurt kavod, right? Of where Gaiva goes wrong. Now, Gaiva really went wrong beforehand, because the fact that he came and he wanted her to do something for him, that's already Gaivadik. So his vision, his version of what marriage is, that he's sholet, right, which we're going to see, that he's the one who's in charge, that he's the one running the show, that expression, that is already where the source of Gaiva lies. And the tikkun of that, which we're going to see, is going to be Esther. We won't, I don't want to explain it now. Okay. Did you?
Yeah.
We're good? All right. And one other thing that's just valuable to point out here is the transformation from Kitov Lev Hamelech Biyayin. So he was in this place of like goodness, which we're going to see Haman has this exact same experience when he was also hurt his kavod. And then all of a sudden, the transformation of him getting to this anger, right? Achashverosh all of a sudden is angry, filled with chema, burning inside of him. So imagine being in like the most positive state of being in the world, and all of a sudden your entire internal being is transformed to complete negativity.
Yeah. It's very interesting. Now that I'm wearing your glasses, it's very interesting. Kitov Lev HaMelech Bayayin. His heart was good with wine.
Yeah.
Means his heart was in the right place. Kirtzoni Shveish. He was doing chesed. There was ava there. Bayayin with the sod, with the, his midos were aligned. They were good. So then what happened?
The action.
Right.
Because what
Kitov
happens...
Lev HaMelech Bayayin.
When I started working on my internal deceit, and I started noticing the complete difference between my external world and my internal world, one of the things that I'm understanding, and I continue to understand, is that one of the problems that has when your external expression, your internal expression is different, is that people end up spending so much time fixing and improving their external expression that their internal world looks like the most ugly thing in the world, when their external world might be the most beautiful thing in the world. And that's this story. This story is, you're talking about a king who's doing chesed the most beautiful way, and so then obviously he's happy.
Right.
Because when you're doing the right actions, it's going to make you happy.
But you see his internal world is a washing machine. It goes from left to right to left. Yeah, it's all over the place. Right.
Yeah, classic.
Beautiful.
Okay.
Okay, so
Beautiful.
he has this pigia in his kavod. He feels that there's an affront to his kavod, which he's created as the currency or the way his family works. He's in charge, and she's affronted that. She's going against that.
Exactly.
And so what's his reaction to that? Does he have a reaction?
It says, he gets angry. Vaiktsof HaMelech me'od v'chamato barabo.
But he doesn't have an action on his own. He doesn't know what to do. What's his confusion?
Oh, a beautiful question. Meaning, how should a king act?
Shouldn't a king that's based on kavod, isn't it the natural sort of consequence that when you affront the king's kavod, you get killed? Like we have in the movies, off with his head, right?
Off with his
Isn't
head.
that, you cannot exist in this world.
David HaMelech has that, right?
But David HaMelech wasn't a king who was based on kavod. And so his was kavod HaMalchus and merida b'malchus, and that's why he got rid of them. But again,
you're asking a good point. No, so I hear you. I hear your question.
But again, it only adds to the question, because even David HaMelech, who wasn't based on kavod, but there was kavod of malchus that you had to have, the natural expression of that is when someone goes against that and has a merida and rebels, then he gets killed. You cannot exist in this world. So what was Achashverosh wondering? Kill her. Was it heinous enough to kill her? That's what he was wondering? Is it bad enough what she did?
Interesting. I considered Achashverosh one of the smartest people in the world. I thought that there's no way you can go from stable boy to king without being smart. Doesn't mean that you have to be good midot. Doesn't mean that you have to be, just means smart. Chachma. Someone who's smart, if I'm understanding it correct, when something happens, before they react, they think. And if you're a king, just like it says about David HaMelech in Brachot, it says that every time he did any din, he afterwards went to Mephibosheth and said, did I do this right? 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 Every single time. So Achashverosh has 7 advisors. He's not going to act on his own. He's not an idiot. He's not going to just act because of anger. He's going to think things through. He's going to talk things through. The big question is, like what you were saying beforehand, if you build an environment, a culture that's built on kavod, what type of advisors do you think you're going to get?
Right. So essentially you're answering that he wasn't really asking them. He was asking them because that's what smart people do. But the Melech Tipesh part of him has only created an environment of advisors that are, or a culture of advisors desire exactly the same thing he does.
Exactly. Maybe one way of looking at these advisors, because, okay, before we get to advisors, I just want to finish one thing off with Vashti. Sorry, we jumped into advisors, but also here to just think about 3 words. It says that he wanted to bring Vashti before the king, beketer, malchut, leharot.
Cool.
Okay, so the same leharot, the same wanting to show, there was a need to show off. So that was there. And then keter and malchut, which we're going to get to so many times throughout here, is keter is the beginning of the sfirot, and malchut's the end of the sfirot. Keter is that the ultimate top of desire, of ratzon, when it comes from Hashem, from the highest places, whatever that means. I don't understand any of this. And then malchut is at the very bottom when it's expressed in this world. So he wanted to kaviyachol, show off that.
To show off the Keser Malchus, the progression from
his, what we think we're doing when we show off, right? That's malchut. Malchut is the external expression that we have. So what we are doing when we're trying to show off, right? What do we really want to show off? Is what's inside of us, not what's outside of us. When someone does a big party and they're showing off the house and this and that, it's not that they're showing off them. They're not showing off what's outside of them. These are just expressions of what's outside of me. So people want to show off their keter, right? And their
malchus.
And this is expression, and this is internal. And this is where people want to get to. It's like, look how amazing that person, look what they desired. They desired good. It's like, you don't know what they desired. They did good. They did good. Okay, cool. All right. the big bad word, vatima'in, right? She put up a boundary, right? When we talk about gvura,
Vitimayin is really the translation would be refused.
She refused, right? But I'm saying, what is that?
Is setting up a boundary.
Yeah, what is the refusal? He's saying no.
Right.
He's putting up a boundary. So gvura, she expressed gvura. But her expression of gvura hurt his kavod. It's crazy. And then he gets to the place that he's angry. He's burning in anger. Right? If 2 seconds ago he was in a tov leiv, now he's burning in anger. Beautiful. Okay. One last thing about Vashti, and then we could dive on to the next. But one of the things I thought was really cool, lahavdil from the relationship between Esther and Achashverosh, where Esther sacrifices herself to go speak with him. Here they're talking through other people. He doesn't even go to the queen and say, "Hey, can you do this for me?" There's no communication. Communication is the foundation of the Torah. I mean, we talk about Breshit. Hashem organizes the world through speech. It's funny because I used to say he creates the world through speech, but he does't. Breshit bara Elokim et hashamayim et haaretz. We know he created everything in potential already. It's just afterwards he organizes it. Vayomer zeh, vayomer zeh, vayomer, vayomer. Which is really cool. And Adam HaRishon, his first job in the world, was to name the animals. Speech. So speech.
You're picking up on the speech element of the comparison between Vashti and Achashverosh and Esther and Achashverosh.
And the necessity for it.
Right, the communication. But there's an element here as well of, I don't know what to do with it, but of clothing, right? Because Achashverosh, Chazal tells us that he wanted her to come undressed naked to him, and she was vitimayin. But Esther later tells Mordechai that I can't go into him dressed like this, right? So she understood that going into the king required a certain amount. They both understood that.
Right.
That you don't go in front of the king, maybe for different reasons. I don't know what to do with it, but that's also another comparison between those two points in time.
Beautiful what you're saying. And then after, okay, let's dive into it. So after Adam and Isha eat from the tree.
Oh, and there's clothing in that story as well, right? The communication between.
They experience busha, right? And then they cover themselves up. So clothing is what we wear to cover up our internal world, our nakedness. In its first expression. And then only afterwards we're going to see by Mordechai where it means more. Right? So, and Yosef, if you want to say in the Torah.
Clothing. Yeah. So now I'm starting to hear comparisons parallels of clothing and expression, of communication. Whereas you're saying that story between Vashti and Achashverosh was a story of communication through officers and not straight.
Right.
And it was also, how do I want you, or what is the expression that's appropriate in front of a king? What's their communication that's appropriate in front of the king? No clothing, this clothing, that clothing. That's also part of this communication discussion.
And the difference between the two, where Achashverosh's desire was to express without clothing in the beginning. He wanted them to see the beauty of the internal, kaviyachol, the keter.
So he wanted her to come naked
no clothing
because
means
no clothing
this is who I am without busha.
He wanted v'lo yitbosheshu.
Yes. And then only afterwards, when it comes to Esther, is there this value to clothing that's beyond just covering up your nakedness.
Right. So I think that there's just, I'm just perplexed by this idea where clothing emerges from in the Megillah here. It's like both with Vashti and then again with Esther and Mordechai, and because she has that little run-in with Mordechai that you can't wear that clothing in the Chatzer HaMelech.
Right.
And so what is the relationship we're supposed to have with the clothing that we wear, and how important is it? These are questions I grapple with all the time. Yeah.
Beautiful. Beautiful. You know, it's funny because I think it was 2 years ago, Adar. Everyone can see I'm wearing a blue shirt. 2 years ago, Adar dressed black and white the whole Adar. This Adar Bet, I wore, up until now, I wore a sweater the whole time. Right? And so like, yeah, every Adar I try to live up to fighting back against clothing when it's not used properly. The way I dress, which is interesting, everyone has their own reasons for dress. The reason I wear the clothing that I wear, 99% of the time is for my wife. The only person that is important to me is my wife. And if she asks me to wear certain clothing, I wear that clothing. And so that's the reasons that I wear the clothing that I wear. Now, the time that I don't do it because of that,
I don't know if that's really using clothing as an expression either, right?
it's an expression of my wife. I dress as an expression of my wife. If anyone else doesn't like it, they can dress for an expression of themselves. I express my wife because that's what she asked me to wear. By the way, also my everything is my wife. My payas that I started growing is because she asked me to. My beard that I cut because she asked me to. I'm an expression of my wife. I'm not an expression of myself. Who's the important one? Who looks at me? My wife. Now, when it comes to button-down shirts, by the way, which is another one, which is funny, is I don't want my wife to have to iron. Sorry. No reason to iron. I don't want to waste my time on ironing. So she asked, hey, wear sweaters whenever you don't need to. So I was like, okay, I'll try to dress up nicely while we're learning Torah here together. But that's Malbush.
Yeah, it's an interesting point that you bring up, and I guess we'll explore more of that through the context of Megillah. But you don't want to be,
I hear you. I don't know.
Clothing at the way we look at clothing today, for sure, coming from the yeshiva world, is also a misuse of clothing. Because if you look back at the history of it, like Moshe Rabbeinu did not wear a white shirt and black pants, right? He didn't wear pants. He wore a long cloak. Whatever kind of history you want to look at, but the modern expression of clothing for what's considered mechubad, what's considered respectful, and what's considered not, was really done the opposite way. Slobodka created this vision of what a yeshiva bachar looks like based on what people were wearing at the time. The Alta looked around and he said, hey, my guys are not being respected because they're not looking like intellectuals dress. So let's dress like intellectuals. So it was a way of sort of integrating the yeshiva bachar or the yeshiva man into the world and saying he's just like you. And today we use it as an expression of I'm not like you. I'm different than you. Look, I wear a black hat, which symbolizes that I believe certain things, not like you. Wait, that's not how it was. So I'm not bringing this up to say that there's anything wrong with dressing a certain way. I'm just saying that we need to look deeper and say, what does it mean to express yourself through clothing?
Right.
Or lack of clothing? And what is clothing as it relates to your inner self?
I love what you're saying because it really fits perfectly with at least with parts of the way that I see things, because I wouldn't say, here's how we've mapped out clothing defining kavod, meaning not the bad kavod, the respectful kavod. I would say, look at the people that we respect and see how they dress. And the people I see around me in the world that I respect, there's no like one way to dress. I respect people who dress like this, and I respect people who dress like that. People who I see dressing like this, some of them are way greater in my eyes than people who are dressing like that. And I'm using this and that specifically. And anyone could fill in what those mean. And so for me, when I look around me at the world around me, there is no one way. Haredi and Dati Leumi and Chiloni and all of these different maps that we put on clothing, which is okay, is just a term to help us guide the type of person that they're most likely to be like at best. But clothing at this point in time in Am Yisrael's history, you cannot say that a Talmid Chacham dresses with black and white. It's just not true anymore.
No, but is there
Chachamim that aren't?
Correct, but is there if everyone in the world would only use clothing as an expression of their, to speak in your language, as an expression of their keser, an expression of their inner world, then what would respectful clothing look like? Without any cultural norms and societal pressures to wear certain things.
Why do we need to dress? Why do we need to find some people as respectful and some people not?
There are actions that people do that are more respectable and less respectable.
But that doesn't impact the person, meaning you can have someone who's acting one way.
Well, no, according to you, it should, because what you do is an expression of what you are internally.
If you're in
it should be.
Place,
it should be right. So if
it's not, but it's not. No one is expressing today. I don't.
So I'm a fundamentalist. Any utopian world where everyone was expressing for good and bad, but everyone was only using clothing and external expression of their internal self.
Okay. In a utopian world, which doesn't exist, where people would live in emet, where their internal and external expressions were harmonized. I'm not saying that they're equal because they shouldn't be. Like we said.
That's why I didn't agree when you said emet. But yeah, but harmony, yeah.
Right. Well, in order to get to harmony, you have to be on a state of emet, at least internally. There has to be an internal truth to yourself that you're not going to lie to yourself. The second you start, if you deceive yourself once, you can go down a path that never just doesn't end because of one simple deceit. But the second your internal world has deceit in it, it grows naturally. It's like a virus inside of you. Anyways.
So yeah, so that's what I'm asking. What would the world look like? That's all.
Oh, what would it look like?
I think halacha. This is where world? I
think we have that in. Yeah, Kohanim. We have all that.
Right. Meaning, when you look at the Kohanim, there's a certain, and from the Torah, so the erva, the genitals are covered, right? But then you also have certain parts that should be covered, can't be uncovered while you're davening, right? So you can look at that and say, how would I daven? That's respectful because I'm standing in front of the King of Kings. So then I should dress that way outside of the King of Kings because Hashem is here, Hashem is there. I'm always in front of the King of Kings. So you should use that as the paradigm of what my expression should be if I want it to be mechubad.
Yes. Except, again, if you define that there's a set of clothing that's considered kavadik in front of the King of Kings, that you're saying this is and this is not, this is and this is not, so then I would agree with you. But because, at least if I remember correct halachically, there is a huge impact when it comes to clothing halachically, what the culture does. So like if you're in a kibbutz, even smell, right? So if you're in a kibbutz and it stinks all the time and you're used to it, that's the way you live, so you're allowed to daven there. If we would come to kibbutz and we're not used to it, you wouldn't be able to daven there from the smell. So like if you're in a kibbutz where everyone wears sandals, shorts, and a t-shirt, that's different than when you're in a beis medrash with people who wear only one style. So culture is critical when it comes to this.
But wouldn't there be? Yeah, I argue that.
Okay.
Because wouldn't there be like, you're always going to go out of that culture, because even if you go to a kibbutz and you see somebody who's wearing sandals and a t-shirt, you say, what would you wear in front of the prime minister?
Many of them, straight up, many of them will wear it.
Culturally.
Many of them will do it. That's the crazy part. If I've spoken to so many people who they feel totally comfortable dressing however they want, and they would dress the same way with the prime minister. The problem is sales is such a big part of our world. No, this
culture,
is the problem.
Sales
is beharoto. No, this is why I don't like doing sales. Because the second you have to alter your speech, the second you have to alter your clothing, the second you have to alter your expression of self in order to convince someone else to do something, that's sheker to me. I don't want to express sheker. I want to express my inner self, my truth. My clothing is not that. The only thing my clothing says is that my wife likes this. Okay. But everyone has their own reasons for clothing. At today's day and age, where you have Talmidei Chachamim that dress of all different types, it's an expression. Now, if my Rebbe comes to me and says, you have to do something, I'm going to do it, yeah? There's no shaila. Thank God I haven't had that happen yet. It hasn't happened yet.
Right.
So, other than that, I don't see a reason. Beautiful.
Okay, let's try to finish.
I know, this is why we talk about.
Let's try to finish Parak Aleph in the...
Okay.
Or at least this idea with Vashti.
Okay, no, so... Okay, the idea, yeah, Parak Aleph. Let's try to get through Parak Aleph. So...
It's already...
What time is it?
23.
Okay, we're going to do it quickly. All right. What is the big picture of Parak Aleph? Big picture of Parak Aleph is that he has 7 advisors that he goes to. The last of the 7... So think about it like this. If we're fitting ourselves into the understanding of the kavadik world, then the person who is the biggest kavadik person comes first, usually.
Okay.
In the Torah world, we don't do this. Right? We go give it at the end, which is interesting. But in the Baruch Hashem, in the kavadik world, so Memuchan came last. So he was least important at the time. His transformation, which is really cool, that not only does he transform in his status with everyone else, but even his name transforms. His name transforms to Haman. Anyway, so he goes to his advisors, right? And he's like, what do I do? Right? Now, these are the chachamim. Right? These are the smart people.
Yodei Itim.
Yodei Ha'itim. So both understand the impact on time. No, this is important. This is what Haman's advice was because of time. He's saying... don't respond to this because of the past. Respond to this because of the future.